again, and there's a question commentaries ask about Moshe. Hillary Clinton wrote a book entitled "It Takes a Village." You know, when we bring up our kids, it's not only they don't grow up in a vacuum. They have their teacher and their principal and the bakery and the nervous gabbai and the kind chazan. And they have and Shamish is screaming to be quiet. It takes a whole village to raise a child. So you would think Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of all the Jewish people, should have grown up with in a shtigol, with warmth, in a village, in a Jewish town. Instead, Moshe Rabbeinu grew up in Pharaoh's backyard. Can you imagine someone growing up, a Jewish leader in Ahmadinejad's home for many, many years, and then he comes back to the Jewish people? It doesn't understand why did he all this entire childhood he didn't have the warmth, the nostalgia of a Jewish community. You see the difference. If someone has it growing up, they're totally different. So one answer I saw in commentaries is that if Moshe Rabbeinu grew up in a community where everyone knew him in his diapers and they knew him in daycare, and they wouldn't respect him. See, I remember I have pictures of you when you were in daycare, when you were a baby in grade 1, grade 2, when you did your science fair. You're going to tell us they spoke to God. Come on, we know you good and well. But if they didn't know him growing up, now he comes back. They don't really know him as a child. They would have more respect for him. That was one explanation. But another explanation gives a whole new light. And when I shared this question with students, I gave them a metaphor, an example. I hope it's not too college style for here, but I'll just try to. I asked them, let's say you're sitting in a 2-seater car, and you're driving at 3 o'clock in the morning. And it's a cold autumn night, and you're driving by the bus stop, and you see 3 people, and you only have room for 1 person. The 3 people are, 1 person is somebody that saved your life 5 years ago. 1 person is an old lady who's freezing cold, frostbitten. If you don't save her, bring her to the hospital, she's for sure going to die. And the 3rd person is somebody in Lashon Nakiya, in clean language, someone you'd love to one day marry. Somebody who ignored your text messages, ignored your Facebook messages, and now she needs your help. She's freezing cold. Who do you save? So this question was asked to 2,000 people that were applying for a job in some big company, and only 1 person got it right. What's the answer? You only have room for 1 person. Who do you save?
All of them.
Sorry, all of them. Squeeze them in. The person that get married, let the old lady die.
No, the old lady.
The old lady you save. So, but this girl you want to marry for many years, and now's your chance to.
So you have another chance,
You drive your car and take the old lady, and you stay with the girl.
Oh, you see? 2,000 people applied, so.
She got the job?
Yeah, she has the job. She has it. She has it.
Oh, she gave the seat to
And
the
so,
old.
what?
She gave the seat to the old lady and
She
Gave the car to the...
She gave the car to the person that saved your life. She says, drive the old lady to the hospital, and you wait for the bus with this with the girl. So that was how did the person get it right? How did Lori get it right? She thought out of the box.
she heard the story before.
No. So, the answer the Mefarshim give is that if Moshe Rabbeinu would have been a slave, he would have thought this is the reality. Save the Jews. I mean, this is the reality. This is our life. You can't think out of the box. We're slaves. This is our reality. Power is the king. We're here to stay. We're not going to change. This is the reality. So Moshe Rabbeinu, not having a slave mentality, growing up in Midian, away from all the slaves, he was able to think differently. He didn't think in the box, he thought out of the box. It's totally wrong. I heard a story during the war. They were lining up a bunch of Jews to kill them in Auschwitz, and one Jew stood up and was screaming at the Nazis. So everybody else told them, "Don't fight them, don't bother them." You know, they were lining up to be killed. But the slave mentality was just go along with them. We can't anger them. Moshe had to think out of the box. So same thing with Emuna. Sometimes we live in a society where we know that if we work 9 to 5, we'll make money. If you do this investment, we'll make money. But it's hard to believe out of the box. Our job is to have Emunah, is to think out of the box. To think not exactly what we see, but to look at society from a total different channel. To look at our money and our health, not just based on what we see, but that all comes from Hashem. So, for the last few weeks, we were reading in the Parsha all about the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And we know there was 4 amos wide and 3 amos, exact sizes. And none of us are really remembered exactly how tall the menorah was and how thick the Aron was, but the Torah uses close to 800 verses to describe the building of a little shtibel, probably 7 times the size of this room, maybe 10 times the size of this room. And the Mishkan is not even, when Mashiach comes, we're going to have the Beis HaMikdash, we're not going to have the Mishkan. So, of course, every vessel has lessons in our life. But the question is, all of creation, the entire world, the entire high tide and low tide, the sun and the moon, everything, all the animals are described and written in the Torah in less than 30 verses. But when it comes to a little shtibel, the deserts, there the Torah dedicates close to 800 verses to building a shtibel. And the question is, we know for science and everything, that if the world was described and written and expressed with more verses, we would have a little more arguments, in regard to science. It's written very short, and the Mishkan is written very, very long. So I once heard an explanation that for an infinite God to make a finite world is no big deal. 27 verses. But for a finite people to create a home for an infinite God, that's lots of work. That requires in a psukim. And it requires for us to overcome our character and to build faith and to build bitachon and work on our midas. It requires so much work. That needs lots of explanation. So we'll just try to tie in these week's Torah portions into the concept of Emunah and faith. The Medrash says that that Hashem tells Yecheskel to tell the Jews how to build the Beis HaMikdash. So Ezekiel tells Hashem, the Jews are in Babylon, they're in exile. Why should we pain them with the building of the Beis HaMikdash? They're in exile. So Hashem tells him that by learning about the Beis HaMikdash, just learning about it, that is, for me, that's considered building the Beis HaMikdash. So us learning now about the Mishnah of Beis HaMikdash, that's our way of rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. So I was talking to my father today, and he's very into science, and I was telling him about that I was teaching tonight this Emunah class. I asked him a little bit about science and Emunah. So he shared with me something very interesting. I'm not a scientist at all, and but a new development that came up last year. There's a professor named Peter Higgs. I don't know if anybody is following it. Professor Peter, yeah, Peter Higgs, and he developed this new study named the Higgs boson, right?
The God particle.
Sorry?
The God particle.
Sorry?
It's called the God particle.
Okay. The God particle. So his theories predicted the existence of this Higgs boson, and it's a theory that would explain how the universe came into being. I personally am still amazed at the fax machine of lesson memory and how the radio works. I kind of understand how radio works. So this new development that costed tens of billions of dollars is beyond comprehension. But I'll try to explain it. I'll try to tie it into Emunah. Basically, all of matter, table, a chair, a cup, chicken, meat, hair, is all made up of little particles, atoms, and molecules. These particles are constantly moving. Tiny particles, and everything's constantly moving, right? Now, every substance has a unique particle. Everything looks different. Tables look different than lamps. Lamps look different than walls. Everything's different, right? The question is, why different particles have different mass? Why do things weigh differently? Why do things look differently? Everything's different. Everything's made out of one particle, right? Why do things look differently? And there's potatoes, there's chips, there's the moon. Everything is made out of particles and atoms, but yet everything looks differently. So he came up with this theory, and for 50 years he tried to explain this theory, and last year on July 4th, his theory was vindicated. I don't know what else to explain, but his theory is as follows. He says that the entire world is made, it's called the Higgs field. Everything in the world, everything, is this invisible energy in the world called the Higgs field. And it's made up of particles that cover the entire world. And everything moves. But this Higgs field slows things down. And some things slow down more than others. I'll just give two examples to try to explain it. Let's say you have a very, very famous man who walks down Carling Avenue. You have Obama walking down Carling Avenue. It would take him literally an hour to walk by. Everyone would stop him. So, and everyone would say, hi, how are you? They would shake his hand. They would ask him for an autograph. What they're doing basically is they're slowing him down. So that Higgs field is all over the world. And when different particles, everything's moving, and Higgs field slows things down, and therefore it gives different mass to different particles. Does that make sense? That's why wood weighs more than metal, and so on and so forth. Right? One more example is, let's say there's 2 feet of snow, and you decide to walk the shoal. If you actually walk the shoal, it may take you an hour to walk, in a half a mile. But let's say you decide to ski the shoal, or to sled. You're not stepping in the snow, you're not falling down. You'll make it the shoal a lot faster. You can ski the shoal in 5 minutes. You're going above the snow. So the entire world is this Higgs field. And some things get slowed down much more than others. And that creates the mass of every particle and every atom, right? Now, Higgs field is the energy that pervades the world, and everything's affected differently. So, what's the connection to us? One connection is that science finally came up with this notion that there's one force that pervades the entire world. Everything. High tide, low tide, this world, the next world, the moon, the sun, everything is part of Higgs fields. But we believe in unity, that the whole world comes from one creator from day one. Now science comes to the same explanation. But I want to share a whole different lesson, and this is based on a talk that the Rebbe gave in 1991, when he gave his famous talk on Chav Ches Nisan. 1991, he said, I did everything I could to bring Mashiach, and now I'm leaving it all to you. The next day, he gave a fascinating talk. It was on Shabbos. And he explained something very interesting. He said, we know there's an interesting in the temple, it says, Mokoy ma'arein eino min amida, that the ark didn't count. So just for example, let's say from that wall to that wall was 30 feet, right? Now let's say this was the ark. If you measure from this part of the wall to here, and from that part of the wall to here, it would each be 15 feet. If you measure from the wall to the wall, it would be 30 feet. It's hard for us to relate to. But the ark itself didn't count. It was in a physical spot, but the ark didn't count. Does it make sense? Does it make sense? Right? So measure from that wall to that wall, it would be 30 feet. But from here to there would be 15, from here to there would be 15, this wouldn't count. It's hard for us to comprehend. But the ark wouldn't count. It was a physical space, but it wouldn't count. Right? Makes sense? Yeah? So, how does it apply in our own psyche? So I once heard, I don't know if it's appropriate to say this, but I was at the JLI conference this past year. We brought some students there, and I heard Jesse Jacobson share this, it's an anecdote, a joke, but he said, how was Christianity formed? How did it happen? So he said that there was, every Jewish child grows up, and their mother tells them they're God's gift to mankind. They could change the world. They're the best in the world, the best thing that happened to mankind. They're really, really God. Then, all of a sudden, they get older, and they get married. And all of a sudden, their wife has to deprogram them. Not only you're God's gift to mankind, in this house you have no say whatsoever. And deprograms them that, just take it easy there. The world will be just fine without you. You have no say, and in this house, if you want anything to get done, make sure it passes by me. So what happened was, there was one Jewish guy that his mom told him he was God, but he never got married. So he still believed he was God. And that's what Christianity was for him. Every one of us has a struggle within. On one hand, we feel very, very strong. We want to achieve. The sky's the limit. We want to grow. We want to learn day and night. But we also feel we take care of our body. And we have to take care of ourselves. And don't work too hard. And we feel like the body and the soul are in constant conflict. They're constantly struggling. So
why make it so complicated?
Sorry?
Why it's so complicated?
Why does she make it that way?
Why it's very simple.
What do you mean? What
The theory of this professor make it so complicated.
I heard today that the studies they did costed tens of billions of dollars.
Yeah, but it's so complicated. I don't see any point on it, which is we can see clear that everything the creation make.
But you see clearly you have spent tens of billions of dollars on. Or you have a neshama, you have a soul.
Come to me. And
What? I know.
I build a nice cover. No, it is really. It's very simple. I mean, we are all part of creation.
Yeah. But I heard this man is an atheist. This man who made the whole study is an atheist, So it's hard to believe after that, I heard Albert Einstein said that a little bit of science estranges man from God, and a lot of science brings man closer. I don't know if he said it, but So you're saying why the whole study? Why the whole study?
I think everything is fascinating. If we look at every creation in a fascinating way, in a beauty way, so the science is science. It's very simple. The way I see it is very simple.
Yeah, you're right.
Because everything is a beautiful creation if we look at this in a beautiful way.
Yeah, if you see a person's brain, you see a child being born. It's beyond comprehension.
It's a creation. You call it physical, beautiful, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's very simple.
Right? Yeah. Right? So we all have this dilemma. On one hand, we want to grow, we want to be better parents, better people. On the other hand, we have our addictions and our compulsions and our urges and temptations, and we're constantly battling the two. So the Aron teaches us that both of them could be right. It doesn't have to be either our desires and our compassion, our desires and our urges, or our spirituality. Somehow, in the ark, both sides are real. The ark was there, physical ark, and it was also above space. Teach us we could live in the physical worlds, take care of our physical bodies, do well in business and succeed and be happy, and still live a spiritual life. The Aron there were two notions, both diametrically opposed, both opposites. It was a space, but it still didn't count. Teach us that we could live in the physical worlds and not that God forbid negate the physical world, but be in the world and still live a very spiritual life. Both could work and blend together. So before Mashiach comes, as we get closer to Mashiach, Hashem showed us that, in essence, we could travel at the speed of light. And there's this Higgs field all over the world. And that was meant to, so to say, slow us down. But it wasn't really meant to slow us down. It was meant for us to have a challenge we could overcome. Really, if there was no Higgs field, based on the study, everything would fly at the speed of light. If Hashem didn't give us challenges, didn't give us the physical parts of a body, our souls could just connect to Hashem beyond words, and we could all day daven and all day learn, and not have any obstacles. Yet God created Higgs field. What does Higgs field do? Higgs field slows everything down. But it's meant to create for us, not to cut it slow down, but meant for us to override the challenges and override the obstacles that we have in our life, and still serve Hashem despite the challenges. So I heard a story. Adin Steinsaltz, I'm sure many of you have heard of him. He translated the entire Talmud into Hebrew many years ago. Now he's working on a whole new edition of the Talmud. So he once wrote in 1992.
Same Talmud, he's doing it in English. He translated
in English, yeah. But he's a team, right? Is it him or is it
he have a team?
Yeah.
And his project to translate it in Russian too.
Russian, why?
I think, I don't know how much, but several years ago it was first Talmud.
Yeah. So he once wrote a letter to the Rebbe in 1992. It was the last response that he got, that he's working on the Talmud full time, to full days, from 6 in the morning to 11 at night. And he was offered to open up a bunch of schools, to administrate a bunch of schools all over Eretz Yisrael. And then he also wrote that in Russia, they asked him to go be like a spiritual leader over a bunch of adult education systems all over Russia. And he wanted to know which one to do. Should he do the Talmud? Should he do the Israel school system? Or should he go to Russia? So the Rebbe wrote him that he should do all three, plus take on a fourth project. So he thought that he was getting a little bit too much of a burden. Like, why is it being so hard? But then he realized that that the Rebbe was showing him that we could be in this physical world and we could still reach the skies. We could be entrenched in society and still live life with much greater, higher goals and ideals. We could be living in society, paying bills and just tuition and school and everything, and have a license and have a car and still live, one inch higher. Still live with, belief and faith and a higher way of living. I say the story of the Shach, the Sifsei Kain. He was one of the great codifiers of Jewish law. He wrote a commentary on the entire. When you do smicha, you study the Shach. He's like one of the classic commentaries that we learn in Shulchan Aruch. So it says that he was seen. He lived in Krakow, in Poland, and it says that he was seen at night. He used to be so drenched in learning. He would be so involved. He would walk on the roofs of Krakow, but the roofs don't all connect. And there would be a miracle that when he was so lost in thoughts that when he reached the edge of one roof, a miracle would happen. He would just float over to the next roof, and he would walk on the next roof. And the community saw this on a constant basis. So the Rebbe was talking about it once, and he said that, what's the big thing? He said that we know intellect doesn't weigh anything. But with him, he didn't think with his mind. He thought with his entire body. His entire body lived it. He lived on a much higher standard. So his whole body was intellect. His whole body floated. Intellect floats. What's the big thing? But he was just showing that that we could live in a physical world in society and still live with a higher conscience. There was a story of the Maggid. The Maggid was rich. There was somebody that came to him, and a very, very wealthy man, and he heard that the Maggid has a lot to offer. So he came to the Maggid to ask him to learn from the Maggid who was rich. And once he learned his teachings, he stayed there. but eventually he lost all his money. And he decided to come to the Maggid and ask him, what's the meaning of all this? I was doing so well financially, and then I came to you to study by you, and then I lost everything. What's the meaning? So the Maggid asked him, it says in Talmud, that if a rich person wants to, if someone wants to become rich, he should go to the south. If he wants to become smart, he should go to the north. So the Maggid, that's what the Gemara says. So the Maggid asked him, what if a person wants to become rich and smart? What should he do? You go to the north or go to the south? You know? But in between is neither. You know? So he didn't answer. So he said, the Maggid told him that if you want to become both, you should just become nullified to Hashem. So you're not really anywhere. You can be both. So really, you're everywhere. You're above space. Once you're above space, you're not so entrenched in society. You can be north and south. You can be rich and smart. So the moral story is that you could be living in society and still have faith in Hashem and still live above. You know, I heard once there was a chassid who came from Russia and he came to New York. So his family lived the life in Manhattan, and he came from Russia. He was in jail for many years. And he came to, so the family wanted to take him to the Empire State Building. So they bring him to the Empire State Building, and they bring him all the way up. And this guy was in jail for 20 years in Russia, and now they're showing him the Empire State Building. So they asked him, what was your impression of the Empire State Building? So he said, it's amazing to see that if you look at the world a little higher, you see how small the world is. If you're on First Avenue, the cars look big, trucks look big. If you're on top, you see the cars and the trucks and the stores, they all look very, very small. So if you live life higher, involved in learning and involved in chassidus and doing good, the physical world doesn't take up much space. So there's it's interesting that there's a whole argument in psychology between two famous psychologists, Skinner and Freud, and they both argue. They have this famous arguments. They have this argument. Like, let's say someone's getting new furniture. They're not really inspired to clean their apartments. What should they do first? Should they first clean their apartments? Should they first bring in the furniture and that will inspire them to clean their apartments? Or should they first clean the apartment and then bring in their new furniture? Basically, it's discussing, and the Rebbe spoke about it in great length. A person has a very, very bad habit. And let's say wants to get married, or a person has a very, very bad, and wants to go in a relationship, or a person wants to get a job, or he feels he has some baggage that's very, very, very hard for him or her to overcome. Should they first get rid of their baggage and then jump into the new job and new relationship? Should they first deal with their issues and then jump into the new enterprise? So Freud was very, very strong in this belief that a person should first go to therapy, get rid of all their issues, and then go into this new enterprise. Skinner believed that a person should first jump into the water. Jump into the water, learn how to swim. A person should first do what they have to do, and that'll get rid of all their issues. The Rebbe was very, very strong, believed that a person should first do. Just Nike, just do it. Once a person does, everything falls by the wayside. So, and he spoke to people I was reading a letter that they wrote, people who had anxiety, or people that were afraid of getting married, or people who were afraid of doing this, and the Rebbe said, just do it. And you'll see everything will fall by the wayside. If you try to delve and discuss, and there's meetings and all that, and after the meeting decide to meet again, nothing gets done. But Skinner believed, just do it. And just bring in the furniture. The furniture will inspire you to clean the apartments. Instead of cleaning it up fully, same thing comes with Emuna. Sometimes we doubt and we question, and there was a belief, just do. Do and do and do, and eventually you'll see everything, the Emuna will come. I heard a story in Michtav Eliyahu. Michtav Eliyahu was Rabbi Eliyahu Dressler. He lived in Manchester, right? Manchester. Dressler. And Dressler. So he writes that during the war, there was a couple that was separated, father and mother were separated during the war for 5 years. And after the war, they met up in the Lower East Side, and they reunited. But the father had their son, for 5 years. And he took care of the son, and he bathed the son, and sheltered for him, and killed for him, and got him food at night, and comforted him. And the mother was in a camp also. But after the war, they met up, and the joy was overwhelming. And they, a few months after the reunion, the wife tells the husband that I feel that you love our son a lot more than I do. And after they spoke about it for a while, they came to the conclusion was, the father did so much for the child. Loving is giving. The more you give, the more you love. So, technically you gave so much to the child. Of course, it wasn't her fault, the mother, but she wasn't involved so much in the child's life for the last 5 years. The father did so much for the kid, so of course he felt more. Same thing with Emuna. The more we do for Hashem, the more we love and feel for Hashem. Love is a verb. It's not a noun. I always tell students that, Hollywood developed this concept of falling in love, head over heels. I said, try to find 5 successful marriages in all of Hollywood. And they can't find it because love is not a noun. They feel they fell, they slipped on a banana peel, they fell into love. It's something beyond their control. But we believe love and faith is something that a person grows into. And the more you do, the more a person feels. If a person has doubts or everything, there was always strong belief, just do. The feelings come afterwards. And just to tie it in to Purim, there's an interesting question in this week's Parsha. There's the Gemara asks, Mordechai min HaTorah minayin. Where do we know an allusion, something about Mordechai? Is there any hint for the entire Torah for Mordechai? So the Talmud says that we read every morning that there were 11 spices, and we read about them in the Parsha, Hatzari, Vatzipoida, and Achavana. We read 11 spices every day, right? So there was one spice that was called Mordachia. Mordachia was a spice. The Aramaic word, Mordor, but Taich, the Aramaic is Mordachia, and Mordechai is hinted from this spice. Now so they had 11 spices, they were grounded together, and as a result, Mordechai comes from this spice. The question is, what's the connection between Mordechai and Mordachia? Mordachia, the spice, it comes from the gland of the musk of a deer. It's a reddish paste, and it had an amazing smell. Now Mordechai comes from this spice. So the question is, what's the connection between Mordechai and Mordachia, this spice? And the question is even stronger. In the temple, they had a hashgacha, very, very strict. They only allowed kosher food. Yet we find that Mordachia comes from the musk of a deer that wasn't kosher. There's an argument what the spice was, but everyone agrees the spice wasn't a kosher spice. And we know the policy was there that every food has to be kosher. So the question is, how did they allow the spice of a non-kosher animal in the Beis HaMikdash? So Rabbi Yoina explains that the transformation was so strong, it was grounded, it became a totally new substance. It had no relationship to its origin. It was from the paste of the musk, it became a whole new entity, and now it was changed completely. So we find something interesting with Mordechai. Mordechai, when the Torah wants to introduce Mordechai, it says, Ish Yehudi, Hayab Shanabira, Ushmoi, Mordechai, Ben Yair, Ben Shimi, Ben Kish Shimini. There was a man named Mordechai in Megillah, he was a Jew, and he was the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish. Now, who was this guy Shimi? Who was his grandfather Shimi? So, we know the story of King David and Shaul. There were 2 camps. Shimi. And Shimi was King David came after he, Shaul was obsessed with David, and Shaul wanted to kill David, kill King David, but eventually David became a king. But even after he became a king, there was still the camp of Shaul that was still very, very strong. They were very, very anti-David, very, very anti-King David. So King David comes to town, and the Torah says, "V'hu kilani klolan and retzes." Shimi cursed David with the worst curse in the world. He cursed David. He told him, "You're an adulterer. You're a Moabite. You're a murderer. You're an oppressor." And that was Mordecai's grandfather. So I have one simple question to ask you. Let's say you're introducing a boy at a bar mitzvah, and you want to say, you know who his grandfather was? He was a guy who stole from the government $150 million. He was in jail for the last 70 years. Why mention his grandfather, period? I mean, why do you have to even mention? Shimei was known to be a bad guy. Why do you have to even mention that Mordecai was grandson of Shimei? Say Mordecai ben Yair, that's it. Why do you have to mention Shimei? So, the answer is, just like Musk has the ability through transformation to become a total new entity, Mordecai, despite his grandfather, despite Shimei, he metamorphosed himself to become a totally spiritual leader. He was able to become a whole different person. So it's every person in the world, no matter what their past was, has the ability to be totally transformed, to live a higher lifestyle connected to Hashem. Mordecai could have became, he's the grandson of Shimei. Mordechai teaches us that you're totally transformed, you become a whole new entity. Mordecai himself had the same idea. He came from a family of rebels, of troublemakers. Yet he himself chose to become Mordechai, a spice it says that the woman, when the spice, when they burned the spice, the women in all of Jerusalem didn't wear perfume because the whole Jerusalem smelled of perfume. Mordecai also had the same idea. During the darkest times, he was able to light up the whole world. When all the Jews were under threat, Mordecai, who transformed himself, was able to light up the whole world. So the moral story is that us living in a society where we have, living within the confines of a physical society, we're able to live with a higher being, with Emuna, with faith, and that transforms a person to live with a higher calling and live with a spiritual drive that, despite being in the physical, material world. So.
Thank you very much.